Hello there everyone, I'm Kirifat Zachary and you're watching World News Program, and up next are the top stories. Algeria rejects Macron's remarks as blatant interference, sparking strong official and partisan backlash. Chad and Senegal blast Macron's Africa comments, highlighting Africa's role in France's liberation and rejecting French security claims. Also in our news, Zionist shelling kills dozens in Jabalia, hits Kamal Udwan Hospital, and devastates Gaza's healthcare system with rising child casualties due to the coup. And Sahrawi Prime Minister urges European governments to uphold international law as struggle intensifies on 50th anniversary of Western Sahara occupation. Stay tuned to the details shortly. Hello again and welcome back to the details. First off in our news, on Tuesday, the Algerian foreign minister condemned the French president's comments on Algeria, calling them an unacceptable intrusion into the country's internal matters. The ministry expressed surprise at the remarks, stressing that they were not only inappropriate, but also offensive, especially given the casual manner in which they were made. It further pointed out that what the French president framed as free speech was in reality an attack on Algeria's territorial integrity, a crime punishable by Algerian law.
The Algerian government has learned with great astonishment of the statements made by the French president regarding Algeria, which offend above all those who believed it appropriate to make them in such a lenient and dismissive manner. These statements must be denounced, rejected and condemned for what they represent, a blatant and unacceptable interference in Algeria's internal affairs. What the French president falsely and slanderously presents as a matter of freedom of expression is not, in the context of a sovereign and independent state, a mere question of free speech. Rather, it is a matter of undermining the territorial integrity of the country, a crime punishable under Algerian law.
Similarly, the lower house of Algeria's parliament strongly condemned what it called the irresponsible remarks made by the French president. In a statement following a meeting chaired by Ibrahim Boughali, the National People's Assembly described the comments as clear violation of Algeria's sovereignty, constituting a blatant interference in its internal affairs over a matter currently under review, according to Algerian law. The Assembly's office reiterated Algeria's firm stance against any foreign interference and its rejection of unsolicited lessons on human rights and freedoms.
The irresponsible remarks made by the French president constitute blatant interference in Algeria's internal affairs, infringing upon its sovereignty and dignity concerning a matter under review according to Algerian laws. This is an overt attempt to tarnish the image of Algeria and its sovereign institutions. Algeria, which endured the gravest violations during the French colonial era, categorically rejects any external interference or lessons in the field of human rights and freedoms. The National People's Assembly affirms that such actions remain unacceptable to the Algerian people as a whole. Furthermore, they will not affect Algeria's independent course. Rather, they will strengthen its resolve to safeguard its sovereignty and dignity.
For their part, Algerian political parties have widely condemned French President Emmanuel Macron's remarks, labeling them irresponsible and immoral. Groups including the National Liberation Front, the National Democratic Rally, the Future Front, and others criticized the comments as blatant interference in Algeria's internal affairs and an attack on its sovereignty. They argued that the remarks reflect France's internal struggles and its attempt to shift its problems onto Algeria.
The Movement for Society of Peace condemns these aggressive actions and arrogant statements, considering them unacceptable interference in internal affairs. The movement calls on the French authorities to understand the changes and developments experienced by the Algerian people since independence. Algerians are aware, mature, and committed to their values, principles, sovereignty, and cultural identity. The former colonizer must stop its repeated provocations and stop exporting its political and economic failures to distract French public opinion and cover its losses in areas it unjustly considers part of its influence. French President Emmanuel Macron's statement about Algeria yesterday are disgusting, shameful, and unacceptable. This stance, based on outdated ideas of domination, is a blatant violation of basic diplomatic principles and mutual respect between independent nations. As long as French authorities insist on neo-colonial attitude of denial and arrogance, they will only deepen their moral and political isolation in Africa and globally. Macron's statements are not significant, and we will not give them more importance than they deserve. They come from a president overwhelmed by his internal problems and who does not measure up to a nation of our stature. Today France feels pain and regret as it sees Algeria capable of punishing those who disrespect it and its history without concern for the interference of former colonizer who left humiliated. Algeria today is a nation that could hold accountable anyone who undermines its revolutionary history or territorial sovereignty. We are in a position to act in line with our national interests.
And in a similar manner, Chadian President Mahamat Idriss Déby slammed French President Emmanuel Macron's remarks, calling them disrespectful to Africa. In a speech on Tuesday, Déby emphasized that Chad's decision to end military ties with France is a clear exercise of its sovereignty. Chad also condemned Macron's comments made at the French ambassador's meeting with the foreign minister, urging France to respect African nations.
I would like to express my dismay at the recent statements made by President Emmanuel Macron, which I believe are contemptuous of Africa and Africans. In my view, he has clearly missed the mark. Regarding Chad's decision to terminate the military cooperation agreement with France is a fully sovereign decision of Chad, one that leaves no room for ambiguity.
Cela ne souffre d'aucune ambiguïté.
Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko also condemned French President Macron's remarks in which he accused some Sahel leaders of ingratitude. Sonko asserted that France lacks both the capacity and legitimacy to safeguard Africa's security and sovereignty. He further pointed out that without the contributions of African soldiers, France might still be under German control today.
If not for the contribution of African soldiers in the Second World War in liberating France from Nazi occupation, France might still be German today. France neither has the capacity nor the legitimacy to ensure Africa's security and sovereignty. On the contrary, it has often contributed to the destabilization of certain African countries, such as Libya, leading to severe consequences observed in the stability and security of the Sahel region.
Sonko accused further Macron of dishonesty regarding Senegal's recent announcement to end the French military presence on its soil this year.
The claim that announced departure of hundreds of French soldiers follows a proposal by France, allowing the concerned countries to announce such a withdrawal first, is completely false. No discussion or negotiation has taken place to date, and Senegal's decision stands for its desire as a free and sovereign country.
Moving on to other topical news, but still Algeria related, Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf arrived in Brazzaville, Republic of the Congo, yesterday evening for an official visit as a special envoy of President Abdelmadjid Tebboune. According to a statement from the Algerian Foreign Ministry, the visit underscores the ongoing communication between President Abdelmadjid Tebboune and President Denis Sassou Nguesso. It aims to strengthen the bonds of brotherhood and cooperation between the two nations and enhance their joint contributions to addressing the challenges currently facing Africa. Still with Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf's activities, who met with Cameroonian Minister of State Ferdinand Ngungu on Tuesday to strengthen bilateral cooperation, following the directives from President Abdelmadjid Tebboune and Béa. Attaf later held a session with Cameroonian Foreign Minister Lejeune Mbela to review agreements made during Mbela's visit to Algeria. Both parties emphasized continued consultations on African and UN issues, with Algeria leading the Security Council and Cameroon presiding over the General Assembly.
Cette relation a besoin d'une nouvelle dynamique, elle a besoin d'une substance plus grande.
This relationship needs a new dynamic and greater momentum. The visit of my brother, the Cameroonian Minister of Foreign Affairs, to Algiers and my stay today in Yaoundé aim with the blessing of our two heads of state to relaunch this cooperation in all its dimensions by updating and modernizing its legal and institutional framework and identifying priorities that allow for a realistic, pragmatic and ambitious Algerian-Cameroonian interaction. The African dimension is a key aspect of our cooperation. Africa is always present in all our bilateral discussions. There are challenges, goals and African issues to defend. Algerians and Cameroonians have always been at the forefront of advocating for African causes in an unstable international context, which requires us to remain vigilant, committed and to exert tireless efforts in defending our causes and interests.
Et parce que ces causes répondent à nos intérêts.
Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf confirmed on Monday the strong alignment between Algeria and the Central African Republic on key African issues that demand collective coordination. Speaking after a meeting with Central African Republic President Faustin Archange Touadéra as a special envoy of President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, Attaf highlighted discussions on critical continental matters. He expressed the shared hope of both Algiers and Bangui that the new commission will meet the expectations of African nations.
We discussed all these files and the President of the Central African Republic was in close agreement and full agreement with his brother, President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, on the sensitivity of these files. I believe that it can be said that they agreed to open the door to consultation on all these files that are of a great importance to the African continent. We express our hope, which I believe is shared by our two leaders, that this new negotiation that will guide the fate of the African Union in the coming years will be up to these challenges and will be able to defend our priorities, ambitions and common goals.
Et nos objectifs partagés.
And for her part, Algerian Secretary of State for African Affairs, Salma Bakhta Mansouri, delivered a message from President Abdelmadjid Tebboune to Gambian President Adama Barrow, emphasizing Algeria's commitment to deepening bilateral ties. During the meeting, both sides discussed strengthening their cooperation. President Barrow expressed gratitude for Algeria's leadership in Africa, particularly its advocacy for peace, security, and counter-terrorism at the UN Security Council. And on the file of Gaza today, 4 Palestinians were killed and several others injured in a Zionist airstrike on Jabalia, north of Gaza. The occupation forces targeted a group in Jabalia al-Balad, resulting in 3 martyrs and multiple injuries, while another martyr fell in a strike on Jabalia Nazla. At a separate bombing of displaced persons in Gaza cities of Tufah and Ashek neighborhoods, 8 Palestinians were killed and others wounded. Civil defense teams recovered 5 bodies and several injured after a drone attack in Ashek, while 3 more martyrs died from shelling in Tufah. And yesterday morning, Tuesday, Zionist forces launched airstrikes on Kamal Adwan Hospital and its surroundings in the northern Gaza Strip. According to the Palestinian Information Center, occupation aircraft carried out multiple raids, bombing the hospital and destroying nearby buildings in the Beit Lahia area. Moving on, over a week after the Kamal Adwan Hospital attack, new and disturbing details about the massacre continue to emerge. Medical staff describe harrowing scenes of Zionist forces storming the facility, setting fire to its departments and forcibly evacuating patients and the wounded, leaving the largest hospital in northern Gaza out of service. The details in this report by Zahra Fajani.
Under siege and against all odds, Palestinian nurse Mohammed al-Na'man continues his mission to save lives despite narrowly escaping a violent military raid on Kamal Adwan Hospital. The 28-year-old fled the northern Gaza hospital after Zionist forces stormed it, detaining over 240 people, including medical staff.
We were surrounded by the enemy's vehicles. We were totally surrounded by snipers, vehicles, bulldozers, tanks of the enemy with fire belt bombardment in the vicinity of the hospital. The situation was very difficult for us. We were receiving a lot of injuries.
The raid on December 27 rendered the hospital's last operational facilities completely non-functional. The World Health Organization confirmed that the closure leaves northern Gaza with no health services.
The number of injuries we were receiving can't be handled by a person, and the hospital was not able to treat them because we were working with the least resources. There were no ambulances.
Naaman spoke openly about the violent treatment he endured during detention. Right groups are calling for an independent investigation into the events and their devastating impact.
We were treated with violence. We were subject to beating. They don't distinguish. There is no mercy for medical staff or any kind of humanity towards medical staff. They forced us to remove our clothes and they hit us with weapons, sticks and all kind of beating.
After being detained twice and finally released, Naaman resumed his work at Al Ahli Arab Baptist Hospital in Gaza City, where he remains determined to provide care under impossible conditions.
After we were released, we were detained for a second time, then released after a long time. We came to Al Ahli Arab Baptist Hospital to continue our medical path and continue the career that we swore to continue with God's will.
Naaman's personal battles mirror the collective struggle of Gaza's residents who've been enduring the nightmare of forced displacement for 15 months thanks to relentless Zionist aggression. Despite the harsh struggles of seeking safety, these people show the world something remarkable every single time: unwavering resilience and an inspiring sense of solidarity.
Meanwhile, thousands of activists and Palestinian supporters rallied in cities across Europe and the US on Monday and Tuesday, demanding the immediate release of Dr. Hussam Abu Safieh, the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital in Brussels, Belgium. Health workers or health sector workers led protests outside the European Parliament, condemning the Zionist occupation's attacks on hospitals and medical staff. In the U.S., demonstrators gathered in solidarity in New York and San Francisco, calling for the release of Dr. Abu Safieh and the protection of humanitarian workers. Munir Al-Burj, Director General of Gaza's Ministry of Health, confirmed the deaths and arrests of hundreds of medical staff, with many from Kamal Adwan Hospital tortured by the occupation forces. He reported that 158 medical workers were killed and 450 arrested since the aggression began, while several hospital staff were transferred to Zionist hospitals after enduring severe torture. The Ministry of Health, meanwhile, warned of an impending crisis in Gaza's remaining health facilities, with oxygen supplies and medicine storage at risk due to fuel shortages. It called on international organizations to act immediately. Meanwhile, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, raised alarms on Tuesday over a rise in child fatalities in the Gaza Strip, citing the severe cold and lack of shelter. Juliette Touma, the Director of Communications at UNRWA, condemned the situation, stating it is unacceptable for children to die of cold in the 21st century due to deprivation and siege.
Babies have died from the cold in recent days, and more may die due to the harsh conditions, lack of shelter, and basic winter supplies. Imagine being in the situation as a mother or father, watching your child perish before your eyes from the cold. This is something that should never happen in the 21st century. Your child dying simply because they lacked a blanket, warm clothes, or shoes.
And on Monday, an airstrike on House and Borage Camp, central Gaza, killed 4 Palestinians, including children, and injured 13 others, most of whom were children. The casualties were rushed to Al Auda Hospital in Nusayrat. And in other bombings across the central Gaza Strip, at least 2 Palestinians were killed and several others injured when occupation forces targeted homes in the Nusayrat and Maghazi camps. A bomb hit Al Ubaid family home in Ain Jalut. while displaced people in a tent near Al Maghazi camp also sustained injuries.
Most of the residents are civilians, children and women, and there are no signs of anything military. What happened tonight is clear proof that civilians are being specifically targeted. Hey, free world, look at the Palestinian people with pity and compassion. Where are the humanitarian principles? Where are the values? Where is the ceasefire we've been hearing about in the news for the past 460 days? Nothing has happened, but suffering has increased, murders have increased, and crime has increased. For how much longer?
Our children were already sleeping, and there was no electricity. We were surprised by bombings without warning. A whole residential block, about 4 or 5 houses, most of which are occupied by residents and displaced people, was bombed without any prior notice. Martyrs and the wounded fell from the upper floors, and it's a complete devastation throughout the entire area.
The Zionist occupation forces carried out 3 new massacres in the Gaza Strip, leaving dozens of victims. Within just 24 hours, 31 martyrs and 57 wounded were brought to hospitals. The Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza reported on Tuesday that on the 459th day of the ongoing aggression, the death toll had reached 45,885, with over 109,000 injured. Many victims remain trapped under rubble or lying in the streets. Qatar confirmed on Tuesday that technical-level talks between Hamas and the Zionist entity are ongoing regarding a potential ceasefire agreement in Gaza. Majid al-Ansari, the spokesman for the Qatari Foreign Ministry, shared during a press conference in Doha that these discussions remain limited to technical matters between the two sides.
Efforts are ongoing. The technical meetings are still happening between both sides. There are no principal meetings taking place at the moment. These meetings, there are a lot of issues that are being discussed. I can't get into the details of these issues, as we usually say, as we are trying to protect the integrity of the negotiation.
In other topical developments, Sahrawi Prime Minister Bashraya Hamoudi Bayoun, speaking at an international symposium in solidarity with the Sahrawi people, reaffirmed the Sahrawi issue as a decolonization matter under UN regulations. He called for global support to expedite the end of Morocco's occupation of Western Sahara, citing key UN resolutions backing the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination.
The rights of the Sahrawi people are recognized by all major international organizations, including the United Nations, the General Assembly, the Security Council, and various continental organizations. On the 4th of October, the highest court in Europe affirmed the rights of the Sahrawi people, declaring that Sahrawi land is not Moroccan territory and that they are two distinct nations. We call on the international community to ensure that these decisions are respected and upheld around the world.
And in another regional development, students at Sais University in northern Morocco have staged a sit-in in solidarity with the colleagues arrested over allegations of assaulting security forces. The National Union of Moroccan Students announced that the protest will continue until their demands are met. Meanwhile, Moroccan parliamentarian Abdullah Bouanou accused the Minister of Health, Amin Tahraoui, of attempting to strike a deal with an American company to digitize Moroccan's private health data, potentially granting access to Zionist-affiliated entities. All right, it's time to catch up on other news stories in the News in Brief with Sofiane Kenturi and Yassine Orekti this time.
The Russian Ministry of Defense announced on Tuesday that its air defense system successfully downed 50 Ukrainian drones and destroyed 6 American-made HIMARS missiles over Russian territory. The ministry confirmed the details in a statement shared on its Telegram account, highlighting the outcomes of its daily military operations.
China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs acknowledged US President-elect Donald Trump's on Monday comments about communicating with President Xi Jinping through aides, while not confirming direct contacts. Spokesperson Jia Kong highlighted ongoing US-China communication. The ministry also called on the US to lift illegal sanctions on Chinese companies, warning of firm measures from Beijing.
South Korea's judiciary issued a new arrest warrant on Tuesday for ousted President Yoon Suk-yeol over his attempt to briefly declare martial law. Investigators confirmed the warrant in a statement released Tuesday afternoon, Seoul time referring to Yoon as the suspect in the case.
Algerian boxing icon Abdelkader Wild Makhloufi passed away on Tuesday at 80. A two-time African champion, 1973, 1977, and 1975 WBC World Championship runner-up, he left a lasting legacy in the sport. The Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune expressed condolences, honoring his contributions to Algerian and international boxing.
Well, the end of our news. Thank you for watching and goodbye.